Hey everyone, I've noticed that many of you are enjoying the videos, but most of you haven't subscribed yet. We're super close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support could help us reach that milestone. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really makes a huge difference and helps us keep creating more awesome content. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. I barely noticed it at first, that small, fleeting moment that should have gone unnoticed. But it didn't. It stuck with me. It was a Wednesday evening, one of those quiet, uneventful nights that filled the space between busy days. I sat on the couch, flipping through channels without really watching anything, while Lisa stood in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. She laughed quietly, almost to herself. I glanced over thinking it was just one of those casual moments, maybe something funny she'd seen online. But then her hand shifted slightly, her thumb grazing the screen with a hesitation I hadn't seen before. She locked the phone and slipped it into her pocket without saying a word, still smiling. A chill ran through me, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't the laugh that bothered me, it was the way she'd hidden it. She always shared little moments like that with me. A funny meme, a joke, something from her work group chat. We shared everything. At least, we used to. I let it go, or I tried to. But that moment stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts like a splinter you can't quite pull out. The next few days passed in a blur of routine. Work, dinner, a few quiet conversations over wine. Yet something felt off. I couldn't shake the unease. Every time her phone buzzed, my eyes flicked over, just to see if she'd hide it again. She didn't always. Sometimes she'd answer openly, chat for a minute, and move on. But sometimes there was that pause, that fleeting tension when her screen lit up and she turned away, thumbing through messages in silence. It wasn't paranoia, not at first, just a feeling, an itch I couldn't scratch. I told myself I was being ridiculous, overthinking the smallest things. But late at night, when Lisa would claim exhaustion from long hours at the office, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, replaying every tiny detail. Her late nights had become more frequent in the last few months, more work dinners, more last-minute meetings. I had never questioned it before. I should have. One night, after another one of those long days, Lisa came home smelling of wine, a scent I'd normally associate with her office parties or a glass or two with her coworkers. But there was something different this time. She was quieter, her eyes more distant. I asked her about her day, about her night, just like always. She offered short, rehearsed answers, her attention focused somewhere else. When I asked about Ray, her boss, she tensed. "Ray? What about him?" She replied too quickly, as if she were expecting the question but unprepared to answer it. I shrugged it off, pretending not to notice the strain in her voice, but it only deepened my suspicion. Ray had always been a looming presence in our marriage. Charismatic, successful, a man used to getting what he wanted. I'd met him at one of her company events, his grip too firm, his smile too wide, as though he already owned everything in the room, including her. I didn't like the way he looked at Lisa that night, but I convinced myself that I was reading too much into it, that it was just my insecurity talking. Now I wasn't so sure. The more I thought about it, the more the little things began to stack up. The late nights, the unexplained phone calls, the distance, her laughter without me. I began to see patterns where there were once only coincidences. And then there was her phone, always within arm's reach, but never left unattended. She had become more protective of it, more guarded, like it held something I wasn't supposed to see. One Saturday morning, she left the house early for a yoga class. As soon as I heard the door close, I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Her phone was still on the nightstand. She had forgotten it. It was the first time in weeks that I'd seen her leave it behind. The rational part of me screamed to leave it alone, to let it be. But the part of me that had been awake every night, reliving the moments where she had turned away from me, took over. I picked up the phone, feeling like a man on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. The lock screen was simple enough to bypass. I knew her password. We shared everything, or at least I thought we had. As I swiped through her messages, I felt sick, like I was violating some unspoken code between us. But I couldn't stop. I scrolled through the conversations with her friends, her coworkers. Everything seemed normal, even mundane. For a second, I thought I was wrong. Maybe I had imagined it all, conjured up a betrayal that didn't exist. And then I saw it. The thread was buried under work chats, almost invisible. But it was there, a single name that stopped me cold. Ray. The messages were innocuous at first. Quick exchanges about meetings and deadlines. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. Subtle jokes, inside references, and then lines that blurred the boundary between professional and personal. I read each message twice, my vision blurring with anger and disbelief. My fingers hovered over the screen, wanting to smash the phone to the ground, but freezing in place, paralyzed by the raw truth staring back at me. Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was incredible. I can still feel you. I dropped the phone, the device slipping from my hand like it had burned me. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the floor. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat like a hammer driving nails into my skull. I wanted to scream, to yell, to confront her right then and there, but I couldn't. Not yet. My mind raced through every interaction we'd had over the last few months. The distance, the excuses, the late nights, it all made sense now. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and I realized how long this had been going on, how blind I had been. But instead of rage, I felt a strange, cold clarity, the kind that settles in when you've passed the point of no return. I knew what I had to do. When Lisa came home that afternoon, I acted normal. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask any questions. I just watched, carefully, as she moved through the house, her smile a mask, her words empty. She kissed me on the cheek, and I let her. But something had shifted. She didn't know it yet, but everything had changed. The trust we once had was gone, shattered like the glass of a broken window. But she would never see the shards until it was too late. The worst part wasn't that she had cheated. It wasn't even that she had lied. It was the realization that I had allowed it to happen, that I had turned a blind eye to all the signs for so long. I had been complacent, naive, but not anymore. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I wasn't going to scream or rage or break down. No, I was going to wait. I was going to bide my time and let her think she had gotten away with it. And then, when she least expected it, I would tear her world apart piece by piece. Because Ray wasn't the only one who could play the game, and I had just learned the rules. I started watching Lisa differently after that day. Each conversation, every movement, became something to analyze, dissect, and unravel. I didn't ask direct questions. I didn't confront her. Instead, I listened more closely, tuned into the changes in her voice, her posture. There were cracks forming in the way she spoke to me, small hesitations when I asked about her day. She offered less and less, retreating into vague explanations about meetings or drinks with coworkers. She used to tell me everything. Now it was as if I was an outsider, some stranger she had to hide from. She didn't know I was already watching her every move. We still shared our evenings together, sitting on the couch, but something in the room had shifted. It was quieter, colder. When her phone buzzed on the coffee table, she'd pick it up quickly, glancing at the screen before turning it face down. My eyes would linger on her, waiting for her to explain who it was. She never did. Not anymore. The intimacy we'd once shared had been replaced by distance, and I could feel it growing each day. I made sure not to change. I didn't want her to suspect that I knew. I'd keep my voice calm, casual, but every word out of her mouth, every excuse, made my blood boil just a little more. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes, as if she could feel the tension, but she'd smile that same smile, the one that was starting to feel like a mask. We were living in a house of lies, but I wasn't going to let her know that I could see the cracks. It was one of those nights when everything finally started to fall apart. Lisa had another late meeting at work. Ray's pushing us hard on this new project, she'd said over dinner, avoiding eye contact. Her fork scraped against her plate, her movements more nervous than usual. We might be out late. I nodded, giving her the same empty acknowledgement I'd perfected over the last few weeks. Don't work too hard, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Inside, I was already piecing things together, preparing for what would come next. As soon as she left, I made my move. Her laptop was in her home office, left open but locked. I had never tried to dig into her work life before, but this wasn't about trust anymore. This was war, and I needed every weapon I could find. I used her password again. It was the same as her phone, something I'd known for years but never had to use until now. The screen opened up to a barrage of emails, work documents, and calendar invites. For a few minutes, I thought I wouldn't find anything. Everything looked clean, professional. Then I saw an attachment on a meeting invite from Ray. The subject was innocuous, project update, but the body of the email caught my attention. It wasn't filled with the usual business jargon I expected. It was short, personal. Can't wait to see you after. Let's finish what we started. My jaw clenched. I scrolled through the rest of her inbox, finding more of the same. There were coded messages hidden between spreadsheets and presentations, little notes that Ray had slipped in, thinking no one would notice. But I noticed. The emails weren't damning on their own, nothing that would blow their affair wide open. But I knew there was more. It was only a matter of time before I found it. That night, when Lisa finally came home, she smelled of expensive perfume, the kind that wasn't hers. She kissed me on the cheek like she always did, her lips lingering for just a second longer, as if to overcompensate for the lie she was living. "How was your night?" she asked, slipping out of her heels and into her usual routine, her back to me. "Quiet," I said, my voice steady. Inside, I was burning. I watched her walk upstairs, her silhouette fading into the darkness of the hallway. I wanted to follow her, to confront her, to scream at her for everything she had done, but that would have been too easy, too soon. I had something bigger planned, and I wasn't about to let my emotions ruin it. Not now, not when I was so close to uncovering everything. The tension between us only grew over the next few days. Lisa became more distant, more evasive. I caught her sneaking glances at her phone during dinner, her messages becoming shorter and more cryptic. I could feel her slipping further away, disappearing into a world that I no longer had access to, a world that Ray was now part of. I didn't press her. Instead, I let her dig her own grave, one message at a time. Every night after she fell asleep, I'd check her phone, her laptop, finding new pieces of the puzzle. It was like a slow drip of poison, watching my marriage unravel bit by bit. But the more I discovered, the more I realized that this wasn't just about an affair. Ray had become bolder in his emails. He'd started sending her personal notes, inviting her to private meetings that had nothing to do with work. He was flaunting their relationship, confident that no one would ever find out, confident that I was too blind, too trusting to ever notice. I wasn't blind anymore. One night, as I was going through Lisa's phone, I found a text that made my blood run cold. It was from Ray, and it wasn't just the usual suggestive banter. It was a confirmation of what I had feared all along. "We'll meet at my place tomorrow night. You know I can't get enough of you, same time?" I stared at the message, my fingers tightening around the phone. There it was, the final proof. She wasn't just lying to me. She was actively betraying me, sneaking away to be with him, while I sat at home, believing her excuses about work and deadlines. I sat in the dark, the glow of the phone screen casting harsh shadows across my face. The rage I had been holding back for weeks was threatening to boil over, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had known this was coming. I had been preparing for it, and now that I had what I needed, it was time to act. The next morning, I confronted her in the subtlest way I could. I didn't accuse her outright. I wanted to see her squirm, to see how much more she could lie to me. Over breakfast, I asked, "You've been working late a lot recently. Everything okay at the office?" She barely looked up from her coffee. "Yeah, it's just, you know how Ray is." "He's a perfectionist," I smiled, forcing it to feel natural. "He seems to demand a lot of your time. Maybe I should have a word with him." For the briefest moment, I saw panic flash across her face, but she recovered quickly, shaking her head. "No, it's fine. Just a few more weeks of this, and things should calm down. Her lies tasted bitter, even from across the table. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. Inside, I was already crafting the next step in my plan. She didn't know it, but I was about to destroy everything they had built. Later that evening, while Lisa was in the shower, I made a call. It was to Marissa, Ray's wife. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but I knew enough about her to know she wasn't the type to ignore what was happening under her nose. Ray had underestimated her, just like he'd underestimated me. "Marissa," I said when she answered, "I think it's time we talked." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then a quiet sigh. "I've been waiting for this call," she said, her voice resigned but steady. "I knew it would happen eventually." We arranged to meet in person the next day. There was no need for lengthy explanations. She already knew. She'd been watching Ray as closely as I had been watching Lisa. We were in this together now, two people betrayed by the ones they had trusted most. And together we were going to bring them down. The meeting with Marissa was brief, but powerful. We didn't need to say much. The anger in her eyes mirrored my own, and we both knew what had to be done. Ray and Lisa had made a fool of me, but they had also underestimated what a man could do when pushed to the edge. By the time I left Marissa's house, I had the final pieces of my plan in place. Everything was set for Ray's company event, the night where he and Lisa would be flaunting their relationship in public, thinking they were untouchable. They had no idea what was coming. When Lisa came home that night, I kissed her like I always did, my lips brushing against hers with the same practiced affection I had shown for years. But this time, it wasn't love that fueled me. It was the knowledge that in just a few days, their entire world would come crashing down. And I was going to be the one to light the match. After I left Marissa's house, my mind buzzed with a cold, ruthless clarity. The betrayal had scorched through every part of me, but now the flames had simmered, leaving behind nothing but ash and focus. It was time to move forward, to turn the chaos that Lisa and Ray had created into something far more destructive, something that would burn their lives down, piece by piece. I isolated myself that evening, retreating into our bedroom under the pretense of exhaustion. Lisa didn't question it. She hadn't asked much about me in weeks, too preoccupied with her own world to notice the distance that had been steadily growing between us. I sat in the dark, the silence of the room amplifying the pounding in my head as I sifted through the memories, replaying them all, the laughter, the late nights, the excuses that had once seemed so reasonable. I wasn't naive anymore. As I lay in bed, the only thought that kept repeating in my head was this: when had it all shifted? When had I stopped being her husband and become someone to be lied to, someone to be discarded? Was there a specific moment, a conversation where she decided I wasn't enough anymore? Or had it crept in slowly, insidiously, the way rust eats away at metal, unnoticed until it's too late to fix? I wasn't angry anymore, not in the same explosive way I had been when I first found the messages. Now there was only this cold, simmering calculation. Lisa had made her choices. And so had Ray. They thought they were untouchable, hiding behind work dinners and secret messages. But they didn't realize I was about to unravel every thread of the life they thought they'd built in secret. But I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to wait. I needed to gather more, to understand every facet of Ray's life before I struck. I wasn't going to give her or Ray the satisfaction of knowing how much their betrayal had affected me. I was done playing the victim. I started digging the next morning. Ray was powerful, successful, at least on the surface. But no man rises that fast without leaving a trail behind, and I was determined to find it. I spent hours at my laptop combing through public records, financial documents, and news articles. He was good, his public persona spotless. But I wasn't looking for what was in the open. I was searching for the cracks. It wasn't long before I found them. A pattern of discrepancies in his business dealings, small at first, but they grew with each contract his company secured. Shady partnerships, off-the-books expenses. It was all there if you knew where to look. I'd seen it before in my own line of work, men who thought they could game the system, who thought they were smarter than everyone else. They always left something behind. Ray was no different. As the hours passed, the pieces started falling into place. Ray wasn't just a cheater. He was a fraud, laundering money through his company, using his connections to line his pockets. It was only a matter of time before the law caught up to him, and I was going to make sure it happened sooner rather than later. The company event, the one Ray had been bragging about to Lisa, was the perfect stage. It was their annual gala, the night where Ray paraded his success in front of investors, clients, and industry leaders. Everyone who mattered would be there, watching him flaunt his power. I could already picture him, standing in the spotlight with Lisa on his arm, his ego inflated beyond measure. But this time the spotlight wouldn't be his. It would be on the handcuffs locking around his wrists. I didn't need to destroy him. I just had to show the world who he really was. When I met Marissa the next day, she was ready. We sat across from each other in a small cafe, our voices low, eyes locked in a shared understanding. She had her own reasons for wanting Ray to fall, reasons she didn't need to explain. We were both here because we had been wronged, and this wasn't about healing. It was about control, about making them feel the way we had felt, powerless. I have the information, I told her, sliding a file across the table. Financial discrepancies. Enough to warrant a formal investigation. Her eyes flicked over the papers. She didn't need to ask where I got them. You're sure this will work? I nodded. He's been careful but not careful enough. The money's gone through enough hands to raise suspicion if someone digs deep enough. And with the right push, the authorities will have no choice but to take a closer look. She nodded, her jaw tight. And Lisa? I'm not worried about Lisa. I leaned back, feeling the cold satisfaction settle into my bones. She'll be collateral damage. When Ray goes down, she'll lose everything. We finalized the details over the next hour, plotting each step of the plan with precision. Marissa had connections at the local precinct, people who could ensure that Ray's arrest would happen at the event. Public, humiliating. Everything Ray had worked for would come crashing down, and Lisa would be left standing in the wreckage. I walked away from that meeting feeling lighter, like the weight of the betrayal had shifted. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but now it was manageable. Now I was in control. Over the next few days, I watched Lisa move through our house, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. She still kissed me before leaving for work, still smiled as if nothing had changed. But I could see it now, the distance between us, the hollow space where trust had once lived. Every time she left, I could picture her driving to Ray's house, slipping into his bed, whispering lies into his ear the same way she had whispered them to me. But I didn't react. I didn't let her see the rage simmering beneath the surface. I played the part of the clueless husband, letting her think she had won, letting her believe that she was safe. It was almost amusing, watching her lie to me so effortlessly, not knowing that I had already outmaneuvered her. The day of the event arrived sooner than I expected. Lisa was buzzing with excitement, her energy infectious as she spent the afternoon getting ready. She twirled in front of the mirror, asking me how she looked in her new dress, her eyes bright with anticipation. You look beautiful, I said, and the words felt like glass in my mouth. It was the last time I would say them. Ray's gala was held at one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. The ballroom was filled with chandeliers, the kind of place where success was flaunted and reputations were made. It was Ray's night to shine, and he was in his element. I could see it in the way he moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing loudly, his arm never straying far from Lisa's waist. I stayed in the background, keeping my distance, watching the way they acted like a couple, completely at ease in their deception. I wondered if Lisa had ever thought about me that night, if she even cared that I was there seeing them together. But it didn't matter. By the end of the night, they wouldn't have much to smile about. As the evening wore on, I felt the tension in the room shift. I caught Marissa's eye from across the room, and she gave me a subtle nod. It was time. Everything had been set in motion, and now all we had to do was watch it unfold. The first sign of trouble came when two men in suits entered the ballroom, their faces stern, their eyes scanning the crowd. They moved with purpose, making a beeline for Ray, who was mid-conversation with one of his investors. I saw the moment Ray realized something was wrong, the way his smile faltered, the way his grip on Lisa's arm tightened. "Raymond Carter?" one of the men asked, flashing a badge. "You're under arrest for financial fraud and embezzlement." The room went dead silent. Lisa's face froze, her eyes wide with shock, as Ray was handcuffed in front of everyone. His bravado crumbled, replaced by confusion and anger. He stammered, tried to explain, but the officers weren't listening. They dragged him out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of stunned silence in their wake. Lisa stood there, alone, abandoned in the spotlight. The life she had built with Ray, the one she had thrown everything away for, was falling apart in front of her eyes, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I watched her, waiting for her to look at me, to see the truth in my eyes. But she didn't. She couldn't. She was too busy watching her world burn, and I was the one who had lit the match. The ballroom buzzed with shocked murmurs as Ray was led away in handcuffs, his once commanding presence reduced to a stumbling figure, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. His gaze darted frantically through the room, looking for someone to save him, to intervene, but no one moved. The investors, colleagues, and so-called friends who had flocked to him moments before now turned their backs, as if his downfall might somehow be contagious. Lisa stood frozen, disbelief etched across her face. She didn't rush after him, didn't call his name. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, her life colliding with the consequences of the choices she'd made. Her eyes flicked across the room, searching for an anchor in the chaos, for anything that made sense. But all she found was the widening chasm between us. I kept my distance, savoring the cold satisfaction building inside me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the unraveling of her perfect little lie. The people around us began whispering, side glances, and hushed voices. Ray was done, his image shattered beyond repair. And Lisa. She was now the collateral damage I'd warned Marissa about. The glittering facade of her life had cracked wide open. I watched as Lisa finally turned her gaze toward me, her face contorted with confusion, as if some part of her mind was still piecing together how this could have happened. She took a step forward, her lips parting slightly, but no words came out. I didn't move. I wanted her to feel it, really feel it, the slow, creeping realization that I had been the one to pull the strings. I broke eye contact first, turning away from her as if she didn't exist. That tiny act of dismissal, walking away from her, leaving her in that storm of disbelief, was more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. She had expected anger, a fight, maybe even a plea for an explanation. But all I gave her was cold, unrelenting indifference. I'd let her fall apart on her own. I didn't need to lift a finger. As I made my way out of the ballroom, Marissa caught up with me. Her expression was calm, though I could sense the satisfaction brewing beneath her composed exterior. "You did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We did it," I corrected. This wasn't just my revenge. Ray had wronged her too, played her for a fool just like Lisa had done to me. Together, we'd orchestrated the perfect takedown, and now it was done. Outside, the night was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. I breathed deeply, trying to clear the remnants of the night's tension. Marissa stood beside me, her arms crossed as she gazed up at the sky. "How do you feel?" she asked after a long silence. I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I wasn't sure how I felt. Satisfaction? Yes. Relief? Definitely. But there was something else gnawing at the edges of my mind, something I hadn't accounted for. It wasn't guilt. I didn't regret what I'd done. Ray and Lisa deserved everything that had come to them. But as the adrenaline began to fade, I realized that the hollow emptiness I had felt before wasn't gone. It had only shifted. "I feel free," I said, though the words tasted strange on my tongue. It wasn't quite freedom I was feeling, but something close to it. Marissa didn't respond, but I could tell she understood. We stood there for a few more moments, letting the weight of the night settle over us. Then, without another word, we parted ways. The next few days unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. Ray's arrest hit the headlines. His company plunged into chaos, and the fallout was swift. Investors pulled out, clients distanced themselves, and his empire crumbled. It was everything I had envisioned. His downfall was inevitable now, and there was no escaping it. But Lisa, she was a different story. She had retreated into herself after that night, barely speaking, barely eating. She didn't even try to explain herself or confront me. Maybe she knew it would be pointless. There was no redemption, no justification that would fix what had happened. The weight of her decisions had crushed her, and I could see it in every movement, in the way she avoided my eyes as if looking at me would be too painful. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. She was doing all the punishing for me, sinking deeper into her own self-inflicted hell. And part of me reveled in it, the quiet, twisted satisfaction of knowing that she had destroyed her own life. But another part of me wondered what came next. The revenge was done, the plan executed flawlessly. I had won, yet there was no joy in it, no final moment of triumph. Just the slow, gnawing emptiness that had been there from the start. Marissa and I kept in touch, our bond deepening over the shared experience of betrayal. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But there was an understanding between us, a connection that only those who had suffered the same kind of pain could share. We met for coffee, talked about what life would look like after all of this, and in those moments, I found a kind of solace. She was the only person who truly understood what it felt like to burn your life down for the sake of revenge. One evening, as we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, Marissa leaned in, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" Her question hung in the air between us, and for a moment I didn't know how to answer. Was it worth it? I had asked myself that same question in the quiet moments when the rush of victory had faded. Had destroying Ray and Lisa really given me what I wanted? Or had it only left me with more questions? "I don't know," I admitted, my voice low. "I thought it would feel different, like it would fix everything. But now, but now it's just you," she finished for me. I nodded. That was the truth of it. I had focused so much on the act of revenge, on taking back control, that I hadn't thought about what would happen afterward. Now that the dust was settling, I was left standing in the ruins, unsure of what came next. Marissa gave me a small, knowing smile. "It's the aftermath. It's always harder than the actual plan." She was right. The plan had been easy, calculated, methodical. But the emotional fallout, the hollow feeling that lingered even after I had gotten what I wanted, that was something else entirely. It was a new kind of battle, one I wasn't sure I was prepared for. We left the cafe that night with a quiet understanding. Both of us had been broken in different ways by the people we had loved and trusted. And while revenge had given us a temporary sense of power, it hadn't healed the wounds. Not really. Back at home, Lisa's silence continued. She avoided me as much as possible, her presence more of a ghost than a person. We were still technically married, though that word felt hollow now, meaningless. She hadn't filed for divorce, and neither had I. Maybe because doing so would make everything final. Maybe because neither of us knew how to move forward. One night, I found her sitting at the dining table, her face buried in her hands. I didn't ask what was wrong. I knew. She had lost everything. Ray, her job, her reputation. And now all she had left was this house and the memories we had built in it, memories that were now tainted by her betrayal. She didn't look up when I walked into the room. For a moment, I considered saying something, offering her some kind of closure. But what was there to say? We were beyond apologies, beyond explanations. This was the end, and we both knew it. Without a word, I turned and walked away, leaving her in the quiet darkness of her own making. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that the real battle wasn't over yet. The plan had been executed perfectly, but now came the harder part, the part where I had to figure out what came next. Revenge had been satisfying, but it hadn't filled the emptiness. It hadn't given me the closure I thought it would. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I wondered if it ever would. The days after Ray's arrest were a blur of headlines, phone calls, and fallout. His empire collapsed quicker than I had imagined. Every piece of the life he had built crumbled under the weight of scandal, and the same people who had once hung on his every word now couldn't distance themselves fast enough. There was no redemption in sight for Ray. He was going to prison, and he knew it. As for Lisa, she became a shadow in our home, a ghost haunting the spaces we once shared. I didn't ask her where she went when she left the house, and she didn't offer any explanation. The silence between us had grown so vast that it was almost comforting in its finality. I thought it would be enough to keep us apart forever, but that illusion shattered the night she finally spoke. It was late, the house quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I was sitting at the dining table scrolling through the latest updates on Ray's case when I heard her footsteps approach. I didn't look up. I hadn't in days. The air between us was thick with everything unsaid. "Oliver!" Her voice cracked the silence, raw and hollow. I looked up but said nothing. My gaze met hers and I could see the wreckage she had become. Her eyes rimmed with red, her face gaunt. Lisa had always been composed, always in control, but now she looked like she was on the edge of breaking. She sat across from me, her hands trembling as she laced her fingers together. I don't know what to say. I know what I did. I know how much I hurt you." Her voice was low, barely a whisper, but there was desperation in it, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to lose. I kept my expression cold, distant. It was the same mask I had worn since I found out about her and Ray. "You don't have to say anything." Her lips quivered as she spoke, struggling to form the words. "I was wrong, Oliver. I was so wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. But please, I need you to understand. Ray, he was—" I cut her off, my voice sharp but controlled. "Ray was a mistake. Is that what you were going to say? That he was some kind of temporary lapse in judgment? That it wasn't what I think?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I had seen enough lies to last me a lifetime. "It wasn't just a mistake, Lisa. You chose this. Every text, every secret meeting, every lie, you chose all of it. You didn't care what it would do to me. You didn't care what it would do to us." She reached out as if to touch my hand, but I pulled back before her fingers could graze my skin. The motion stopped her cold, and for a moment her facade cracked completely. She looked like she might collapse under the weight of it all. "I was lost," she whispered, the words fragile and pitiful. "I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't happy, but it wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. It was me." I leaned back in my chair, letting her confession sink in. Her words felt empty, hollow attempts to justify the months of betrayal, as if somehow her misery could excuse everything. I had heard enough. "You weren't happy," I repeated, my voice calm but ice cold. "And you thought screwing your boss would fix that?" She winced at the harshness, but I wasn't done. "Ray didn't fix anything for you, Lisa. He just gave you an escape, a way to avoid facing whatever was wrong in our marriage. But you didn't just run away. You destroyed us." The tears began to fall freely now, and she made no attempt to stop them. "I know," she said, her voice choking on the words. "I know I ruined everything. I've lost everything. I don't know how to make it right." I shook my head, the bitterness welling up inside me. "You can't. There's no going back. You don't get to erase what you did. You and Ray thought you could have it all. Your affair, your lies, your little secret. But look where that got you." Her sobs filled the silence, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of something. Pity, maybe. But it wasn't enough to change anything. I had spent too long simmering in my anger. Too long plotting this moment to let her tears sway me now. "I don't want your forgiveness," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I just need you to understand I loved you. I still do." The words hung in the air like poison. I could feel them seep into me, trying to find some crack in the armor I had built around myself. But it was too late. Whatever love we had once shared had been buried the moment she chose Ray over us. "You loved me?" I repeated, shaking my head. "No, Lisa. You loved the idea of me. You loved what our life looked like from the outside. But real love doesn't betray. It doesn't lie. What you did with Ray wasn't love. It was selfish. She collapsed into sobs, her shoulders shaking with the force of it, but I remained unmoved. This was what she had reduced herself to, someone who had burned her own life to the ground and was now begging for the ashes. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. You want me to understand, but you never once tried to understand what you did to me, Lisa. You were so focused on your own misery that you didn't even care what your actions would do to me, to us. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, and I could see the hopelessness in her eyes. Oliver, please. I don't know what to do. I have nothing left. For a moment, I thought about walking out of the room, leaving her there to wallow in the wreckage of her choices. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the hollow victory I felt after Ray's downfall. Maybe it was the need to end this once and for all. I leaned over the table, locking eyes with her, my voice low and steady. You're right, Lisa. You have nothing left. And you know what? That's not my problem anymore. I straightened up, watching as the realization of my words sank in. I was done. There was no redemption here, no second chance, no salvaging what was left. We were finished, and she needed to understand that. Goodbye, Lisa, I said, the finality of the words lingering in the air between us. I walked out of the room without looking back. The echo of her sobs followed me down the hall, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. She had made her choice, and now I had made mine. As I reached the front door, I paused for just a second, glancing back toward the darkness of the house. For years, this had been my home, our home. Now it felt like a stranger's. There was nothing left for me here. Nothing that tied me to the person I used to be. With a deep breath, I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my skin. The weight of everything, the Lisa, the betrayal, the revenge, seemed to lift, if only for a moment. I had gotten what I wanted, but the victory tasted bitter. I stood there for a while, watching the stars in the sky, wondering what came next. The final confrontation was over, but the battle inside me still raged. I had destroyed the life we had built together, and now I was left standing in the ruins. But as the night stretched on, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to rebuild any of it. I was going to leave it behind, just like I had left Lisa, and move forward. There was no going back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. The days after I walked out of that house were quieter than I'd expected. No fanfare, no dramatic storm of emotions, just silence. Lisa's sobs still echoed in my mind, but they were a distant noise now, like the final notes of a song that had long ended. I moved into a small apartment downtown, the kind of place where no one knew your name, and anonymity was a blessing. I needed to clear my head, to put distance between myself and the wreckage of the life I'd burned to the ground. The revenge had been everything I'd planned for, but now that it was done, there was nothing left to hold on to. The headlines kept rolling in for weeks, each one more damning than the last. Ray's face was plastered across the news, his empire in shambles, his assets frozen, and his future all but guaranteed to be spent behind bars. It was exactly what I had wanted, exactly what I had orchestrated. I should have felt satisfaction, maybe even a little triumph. But as I sat in that cramped apartment with nothing but the hum of the city outside, I realized the emptiness inside me hadn't been filled. I tried to keep busy. Work was an easy distraction. The long hours kept me from thinking too much, from letting the memories creep in. But late at night, when the city lights flickered outside my window, I couldn't stop the thoughts from swirling. I had gotten my revenge, ruined their lives as thoroughly as they had ruined mine. But what had it really changed? Marissa called one evening, weeks after it had all settled. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the same weariness in her tone that I felt in my bones. "How are you holding up?" she asked, the words tentative. "I'm fine," I replied, though we both knew it was a lie. "And you?" "Surviving," she said. "It's been strange. The silence, you know. After everything, I thought it would feel like freedom. But it just feels like nothing." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. We were in the same place, stuck in the aftermath of our own destruction. Yeah, I get that. There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that we both let linger. Then she said, I've been thinking. Maybe we should meet. Talk. See if there's anything left after all of this. It wasn't a surprise. We had been orbiting each other since the day Ray was taken away in cuffs. Marissa and I were bound together now, not by love, but by shared scars. And maybe that was enough. We met at a small cafe, the same one where we'd first plotted Ray's downfall. The place hadn't changed, but we had. We sat across from each other, sipping coffee in the quiet, our conversation easy but tinged with the weight of everything we'd done. She looked better than in the last time I'd seen her, less burdened, though I could still see the cracks beneath her calm exterior. Do you ever regret it? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I thought about it for a moment, letting the question hang in the air. No, I said finally. I don't regret what we did. Ray and Lisa, they deserved it, but I do wonder if it was worth it. Marissa nodded, her gaze dropping to her cup. Yeah, me too. We sat in silence for a while, watching the world move around us. Life had gone on, even after everything we had burned down. People still walked the streets, sipped their coffee, lived their lives as if nothing had happened. It was strange watching the world continue to spin while we stood in the wreckage of our own making. I don't know what comes next, she admitted, her voice soft. I thought once Ray was gone, I'd feel free, but now that he's out of the picture, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I think we just move forward, I said, though the words felt empty. Moving forward sounded simple, but it was anything but. Still, it was the only option left. She smiled faintly, a ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Yeah, maybe we do. After that, Marissa and I spent more time together, not in the intense whirlwind way of a new relationship, but in a quiet, steady companionship that grew from the ashes of our shared pain. We were two people who had been broken by the same betrayal, and though we didn't have all the answers, we found solace in each other's company. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close to understanding, and that was enough. The divorce papers came a few weeks later. Lisa didn't fight it. She didn't call or try to explain herself further. She had vanished from my life as completely as Ray had. When the papers were signed, it felt more like closing a chapter than ending a marriage. There was no fanfare, no big emotional goodbye. Just a quiet end to something that had already been over long before I realized it. I had thought that revenge would heal the wound, that seeing Ray and Lisa's lives crumble would give me the closure I needed. But as the months passed, I realized that closure wasn't something that came from destroying others. It came from within, from accepting that life had changed and that the past couldn't be undone. In time, the anger I had clung to for so long began to fade. I stopped replaying the memories, stopped dissecting every moment of our marriage to find where it had all gone wrong. There was no point in looking back anymore. The answers didn't matter. What mattered was the future and what I chose to do with it. Marissa and I grew closer as the months went on, our bond deepening in ways I hadn't expected. We didn't rush into anything. There was no need to. We had both been through enough to know that healing took time and that rebuilding trust wasn't something you could force. But little by little, we began to let each other in, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. One evening, as we sat together on our balcony, watching the sun set over the city, I turned to her and said, "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if none of this had happened?" She glanced at me, her eyes thoughtful. Sometimes. But then I remind myself that we can't change the past. All we can do is learn from it. Yeah, I said, nodding. I guess you're right. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. We're different now, Oliver. Stronger, maybe. A little more scarred, but stronger. I thought about that for a moment, letting her words sink in. We had been through hell, both of us, but we had come out the other side, still standing, still moving forward. Maybe that was what healing looked like, not erasing the pain, but learning how to live with it. As the night deepened and the stars flickered into view, I realized that I was ready for whatever came next. The revenge had been a necessary part of my journey, but it wasn't the end. It was just one chapter in a story that was still unfolding. Lisa and Ray were gone, their lives reduced to rubble, but my life was still here, waiting to be rebuilt. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. Not because I had destroyed them, but because I had survived them. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer controlled me. I had taken my power back, not through revenge, but through the decision to move on, to let go, to start again. And as I sat there, with Marissa by my side and the quiet hum of the city below us, I knew that I was ready to begin that new chapter. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like a promise, and I was ready to meet it.